So many people are posting on social media, posting in groups saying, it's been this long since I had a drink. I really feel like I can keep it under control now.
For me, it's kind of always been two voices, like the one that is trying to make better choices and be healthier and happier, and then the one that thinks I deserve some kind of treat.
If you're wrestling with moderation, that might be a good clue. That may be an indication that something more is going on.
I was like, yeah, I think I'm cured. I can moderate now. When you're looking at other people around you who can go to dinner and have a drink, and you're like, oh, they can do it. I can do it. Like, I'm I'm strong. I can do this. I can have one drink.
That nostalgic piece where I was out at a cottage in early sobriety, and I was sitting out at the end of the dock, and that was a place where I always had a drink with me. That was one of those spots where I was wishing that I could have a drink.
Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery Podcast, where we believe that connection is the opposite of addiction, vulnerability is the antidote to shame, and personal growth is the key to loving your sober life. We're your hosts, Julie Miller and Steve Knapp. Join us in conversations with people all over the globe about how you can thrive, not just survive, in a life without alcohol.
Before we jump into the episode, we've got an announcement for our regular listeners. If you followed us since the beginning, as so many of you have, you'll know how much we've changed and evolved over the years.
So we're going to rebrand the podcast to No Alcohol Needed in the new year to reflect the growth and the evolution that we've experienced. Basically, we're leveling up. So you're going to see some new colors, a new logo, a slightly new vibe, but it'll still be the same hosts doing the same thing. We're having meaningful conversations that help you learn how to be happy, no alcohol needed.
We'll announce more in the coming weeks, so keep an eye out on social media and our website for the new logo and all of the changes. We'll roll right into the new year with great new content aimed at personal growth, emotional intelligence, and real happiness in sobriety.
Okay, let's dig into this week's conversation. All right. Welcome, everybody. So happy to have you here with us today. We are hanging out with Lucy, Brenton, and Bry, and we are going to dig into the idea of moderation. So we all know that voice that shows up in your head trying to convince you that you can moderate your drinking or like drink like a quote unquote normal person. And it can be really convincing. We hear that so often. So many people are posting on social media, posting in groups saying, it's been this long since I had a drink. I really feel like I can keep it under control now. And we all know what that feeling is like, what that sounds like. So we're going to dig into it a little bit today and talk about what our experiences have been like and maybe how to get that under control a little bit if that voice is getting a little too noisy for you. So before we jump into our actual conversation, we are, of course, going to have these awesome people introduce themselves to you, our listeners, so you can get to know them a little bit. Lucy, I'm going to let you kick us off. Do you want to share a little bit about yourself with our audience?
Yeah, I'm Lucy Linger. I'm in the UK. I'm in the southeast of England. I'm a writer, director, producer working in film and TV and theatre. I run a production company called Linger Longer Films and a theatre company called Threadbare Theatre Company. And I'm just about to have my debut feature film released. So it's very exciting times here in the UK.
Exciting.
So
Exciting.
cool. And so excited for you that you've got this coming up. It's been a really long time since we've had Lucy on, so it's neat to catch up and hear what you've been up to.
How long I've been sober for. I keep forgetting. I forget to do that. So 3 years next May is my journey. So
fantastic. Cool. Well, congratulations to you on that and on all your cool stuff you've got going on. It's great to have you back. And then next we're going to go with Brenton. Do you want to introduce yourself also?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Brenton, and I am up in the Pacific Northwest, Washington State, in the U.S., and I have been sober for 1,218 days, so about 3.5 years almost. Yeah, I have a couple of things going. I run the Office Recovery account, so for any fans of the show The Office, sorry, the US version at this point. But I run a meme-based page based off of that and recovery. And then currently, my biggest project is the Bear Recovery Foundation, and so that's a foundation that exists to create scholarships available for folks coming out of treatment, so they can continue their aftercare treatment process. And so that's what the Recovery Foundation specializes in, and it's centered around a bear crawl event that I will be doing. And so I'm bear crawling over 7 miles this coming May on my hands and feet to raise funds for that aftercare scholarship. So that's kind of the big focal thing that I've got going on right now. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, it is
Awesome.
super
Yeah.
cool to see what you're doing. Brenton is always posting like workout videos and like working up. I can't even imagine all of the muscles that it must take to actually bear crawl for any length of time. I think I can make it like 10
All
feet.
of them. Yeah.
All of
It's
Yeah,
them.
across my living
all of
room.
the
So
muscles. Yeah.
so cool. So for sure, check out his social media, and we're gonna post links for everybody's social media and other cool stuff that they're doing in the show notes. So definitely to our listeners, make sure you guys check those, and you can keep up with all of these awesome folks. But yeah, thanks so much for being here, Brenton.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
For sure. And then last but not least, we've got Bri, who is here for the first time. How are you?
I'm great. Yeah, my name is Bry. I'm from Rifle, Colorado, and I've got 18 months, November 29th. So by the time this episode airs, I'll have a year and a half. So pretty exciting. I'm a tattoo artist here in Rifle. I base my art around recovery and inspiration and anything that will make people feel good. But recovery tattoos is kind of my jam, and it's really cool. I actually tattoo like 90% of people who are 90% of my clients are in recovery. So the other artists in my shop joke that we have a full-time AA meeting going on in our shop. Um, so yeah, but that's a little bit about me, and yeah, here in Rifle, Colorado.
So cool. So Bri is actually close enough that the next time I get a tattoo to represent another phase of my recovery, I'm totally going to drive to Rifle for that.
Okay.
It'll be awesome.
Love
My
it,
first
love it, love it.
tattoo was when I was 3 months sober. I never got a tattoo before that, so they're all recovery related, and yeah, so it'll be
Love it.
really neat to connect.
Hell yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we are going to dive into this, and we know we've got listeners who have a lot of these moderation thoughts and ideas coming up in their heads, and I think we've all got some stuff to share. So let's start out with like just talking about what that voice in your head sounds like. What kind of things is it actually saying, trying to talk you into having a drink again? Anybody's welcome to start.
I was going to say, for me, it's kind of always been two voices, like the one that is trying to make better choices and be healthier and happier, and then the one that thinks I deserve some kind of treat. So I think that constant push and pull. I'm neurodivergent as well, so I have a lot of those two voices going on in my head. So that kind of push and pull, I think that's what rather than like just one voice, I kind of associate the whole game of trying to moderate as almost me as a moderator between those two parts of myself trying to sort of battle. So that's kind of how it used to sound in my head.
It's almost like the angel on one
Yeah.
side of on one shoulder and the devil on the other shoulder, right? Like the constant in your ears whispering.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. Yeah, it was kind of interesting reading over the format. It dawned on me that one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this subject is because I actually had a year and a half of sobriety back in 2020, and I wasn't working a program. I wasn't doing the work or any of those things. And I remember after a year and a half sobriety, I was on my way to a dinner, a business dinner, and I was like, I think I'm good. I think I can have one martini with dinner. I think that I'm recovered enough that I can start having a drink when I go out to dinner. Or, I was like, yeah, I think I'm cured. I can moderate now. That started me. I did have just one drink that night. But it sent me right back down a huge alcoholic hole, which lasted another 5 years, 4 years, another 4 years after that. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting how we think that we can do that. And for me, um, it's really it's really easy to get in that hole when you're looking at other people around you who can go to dinner and have a drink, and you're like, oh, they can do it. I can do it. Like I'm I'm strong. I can do this. I can have one drink. So, that recognition that my brain operates chemically, physiologically, all those things differently than a normie, as we say, is so, so true. And I have to constantly remind myself my brain doesn't work the same as theirs.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you said something there, the like, I'm cured. I've done this long enough that my brain is different now, right? I think that's another one of those common thought processes or thought patterns is, well, I've done this long enough. I've proven that I'm okay and I'm not the same as I used to be. So I'm sure I'm cured, I think is another really, really common one we hear
Hmm. For
for
Mhm.
sure.
sure. What about you? What did you have, Brenton?
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, for me, I find that it kind of flares up when I'm kind of living in the nostalgia of actually the good memories that I've had that have surrounded drinking. Like, um, certainly a lot of bad stories and like just wreckage, right? But there was also a lot of good memories and good times that had alcohol involved. And I think that, not so much, lately, but probably within the first year or so, like towards the end of that first year, where I started kind of thinking, oh, maybe I'm a little bit better. But those nostalgic memories would pop up, and I would start to think, uh, you know, I want to recapture those moments. And in order to do that, I think I need to be doing the exact same thing that I was doing before and drinking. And in those situations, I just have to, stop myself and reflect on all the amazing things that have happened since getting sober and since being in the recovery journey, and really comparing and contrasting, like, yes, that was a great memory and it's okay to like appreciate that, but we do have to let that go. Like, at least I do. I have to let that go and let it just be what it is, right? It was a good moment in time. But looking at all the like beautiful moments that I've had in recovery and how like vastly different that compares when it comes to like just full life satisfaction compared to that brief moment of joy that I had, that one evening at the concert or something like that. So that's kind of where it flares up for me at times, is like there's kind of that pullback of I want to kind of relive that moment and being willing to accept the fact that I can't relive that moment in the exact same way. But then actually kind of having that challenge of like, you know what, I think I could actually enjoy that moment more in a different way, being sober. So, and like the concert example, I've gone to a couple concerts now sober, and it ended up being amazing. Like, it was absolutely incredible. I was singing, I was dancing, and you don't ever want to see me sing or dance, but I was, and it was wonderful. And the crazy thing is I remember every second of it. I think unless you've been there, you don't realize how incredibly valuable that is to actually have the memory and not just the memory that's associated with the video that got taken of that night. So,
Right.
yeah.
Oh, that is real. Like the video thing, pictures and videos, and you're like, yeah, and you don't actually
Yeah.
remember
Mm,
the thing that's been really painful for me sometimes when watching some of the
mm.
things or looking at the pictures. That's a little bit of a side note, but for sure, Steve and I have both done the concert thing too, and it's
Yeah,
completely different
I
experience.
did a 5-day festival, and that was really interesting because you kind of get, I still had a great time with everybody, but you get, because people start drinking so early. That's one of the things I found really interesting as well, is like everybody's great and then they get less great, and then in the end they're so circular that like I'd be like, I've just got to go to the loo, I've just got to go over here, like just to get away from people who are like don't really know what they've said, what they're saying next, where they are, what's happening. And one of the things I found really interesting at that festival was we had a lot of the kids with us. And so I was like hanging out with the kind of like, 12, the tweens, if you like the 12 to 15 who like can't blag a drink, they can't pretend to be an age that, that's going to get them a drink. And we just had such a great time. And like, that's
Mhm.
been a real joy for me, is like reconnecting. Like Brenton was saying, you kind of, there's the nostalgia for who the times that you had when you were drinking. But one of the things, like, I found, like, Alanis Morissette played over here, and I drove, and all my girls from my high school, like, came with me, and it was like being 17 again, because I didn't care about drinking. Like, I had a car, and I could get away from my parents and go and do whatever I wanted, and no one could find me. I could drive to Scotland if I wanted to. Like, I could, that sense of freedom, like,
Mhm.
that's been, so I think, like, sometimes it's like taking time to, like, find what are the new things that you love, and also going back even further, like, how did I enjoy parties before I was drinking, like, that
Right.
culture
Mm.
where we're sort of trained to think, like, oh, when I'm older I'll be drinking at parties, and then the next thing you're like some passed out person in a corner of a party, like, not having as good a time as when you were 10 and you
Mhm.
Yeah.
needed the alcohol, like, so reconnecting with that inner child, I think that inner child doesn't want moderation.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. What about you, Steve? Do you ever get
Yeah.
the whole moderation voice thing? What does that sound like for you?
I very quickly start remembering what it was like when I was drinking. That memory holds a lot of weight. So I don't know that I had too much of the moderation voice, the one that said, yeah, you'll be all right. Just have a couple here and you don't even have to drink anymore afterwards. Like, you can just enjoy this night. And I think Brenton kind of hits on that, like, that nostalgic piece where I was out at a cottage in early sobriety, and I was sitting out at the end of the dock, and that was a place where I always had a drink with me while fishing. And I remember being back out on that dock. That was one of those spots where I was wishing that I could have a drink, because it was and it was the nostalgia behind it. I actually never kind of put words to it, much like Brenton just did, but it was like wanting to relive that picture,
Mm.
because there was the moment of goodness there that wanted to recapture, like the drink was going to bring back the joy of that memory or something along the lines. And that's just a nasty lie that you tell yourself, that the devil sitting on the one side of the shoulder starts nattering at you. But I was so afraid of what another drink would do to me that the thought of moderation scared the fuck out of me, more than the wonder of trying to recapture a bygone memory. Because
Mhm.
I was so terrified to, like, lose something, so terrified to, if I was gonna drink again and I was gonna end up where I ended up before, fuck that. I don't think I believed I had the power to overcome whatever it was that was going to send me back down the hole. That was the one thing, because I started out in a 12-step program, since moved away, but that was the one thing that they instilled in me that I believed to my core. Like, if you drink again, you're fucked, buddy. And I was like, okay, I guess that's true. And I believed that one as fact. And to this day, I won't even bother fighting that belief. I'll just carry that one to my grave. I'm okay with that.
That's probably a good one to hold on to for sure.
I feel like I spent 10 years trying to moderate. Like, I mean, I think I've had alcoholism since I was, in my, 20s, but I feel like I spent the last 10 solid years of my drinking trying to moderate. And, like, I always joke that if I had come into AA, you know, before I actually got sober, I'd probably have a fucking 5-gallon bucket of 24-hour chips, because I tried and tried and tried and tried to moderate, tried to moderate, and it wasn't until I was in rehab, they had this big chart up on the wall that showed, like, when you have an alcoholic brain and you take a drink and it goes down this receptor, this receptor, this receptor, this receptor, and so, like, chemically, this is what your brain does as an alcoholic, and as a non-alcoholic, when you take a drink, it goes here, 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 here. And when they showed that, like, up on the thing, and they did a genetic test on me, and I had the double addict gene in me personally. And so, like, knowing I have that gene looking at this chart, I was like, oh shit, I legitimately can't have like, I chemically can't have just one. And I remember that was like a huge turning moment for me sitting in front of that chart going, it doesn't matter how hard I try. My brain will always do that. Always.
Mhm.
And that was such a big moment for me to see that, like, it's not me. I'm not the failure. That's how my brain works, you know?
Right. Yeah, it's
But
So that
not
was a
Hmm.
something
big
you
moment.
can willpower your way through,
and
right?
but so people who, even people who are moderating, like no one knows what is potentially going to derail them, like, and when you've been out with somebody who has ended up throwing up everywhere, or like, most people don't set out, even heavy drinkers don't set out and be like, right, tonight I'm going to be a total disaster for everyone to deal with and I'm going to vomit. Like, most people, even on a night by night basis, they're like, hey, I'm going to go out, I'm going to have a few drinks, I'm going to let loose, I'm going to have a good time. But then something on that day, I mean, and that's just a one-off, like something that, that happens, that ends up in this nightmare situation. And then over, when you think about that over a prolonged point of time, you get people who are like, everything's going great for them, they think they can moderate, they think alcohol's fine for them, and then they lose their job, and then they step it up, and suddenly, like, so you're like, for me, I kind of felt like with moderating, you're playing this like really dangerous, like threefold kind of game every time you step back in, because you're like, it's an addictive substance. It's addictive like gambling, like it's addictive in terms of the behaviors and like the habits. And it's, your brain is still thinking of it like a treat. So when you
Hmm.
don't give it to yourself, and when other people can have it and you can't have it, and you haven't earned it, so you're not good enough. So then you've got all this like self-worth and all this kind of stuff. Those things are going on, but then also the advertising. You're still believing all the advertising. I can't go fishing without having a drink, because I want to look like that picture. Like, I'm a sophisticated lady finishing work. I want to have a glass of wine. We're out for fun, like shots, shots, shots. Like, there's, it's all in film, it's all in advertising, it's all in. So you're like, every time you step back in, you're still believing the framework and the culture of alcohol. And so for me, that was like the biggest thing, because once I was like, it's not a treat, it's poison, and it makes me feel really crap. So I actually feel really sorry for people who are treating it like a treat and giving
Mhm.
it the gift that is horrible. That was a massive turning point for me. And for me, the marketing side of it, like, I don't need some multi-million-pound advertising campaign to tell me how to celebrate my wins. Like, oh, I've got to go out and spend 30, 40, 50 quid on a bottle of champagne because somebody, 200 years ago decided that that would be a good way to sell fizzy poison to people, and here I am
Exactly.
all
Oh,
these years later and I'm still bought into it. So that's what
right.
I feel like for me with the moderating, that was a massive turning point, was like, I want to let go of the nonsense around it and not have people say to me, oh, couldn't you just treat yourself this one time? I'm sure you'd be able, like, just for the wedding, like, and risk being vomiting somewhere and falling over on the dance floor and looking like an idiot and not remembering stuff. Like, no, that's not a treat. That is not
Right.
a treat. A treat is home in bed, up the next day, feeling amazing. That's the treat now. So you kind of like, I think that's been a big part of moderating for me.
To that point about the, it being a treat or just changing the way you look at it. I was in Spain hiking earlier this year, and I was hiking a part of the Camino de Santiago. So you're hiking from essentially bar to bar, right? Like, that's what it is. And of course they have coffee and they have some snacks and stuff. I had ordered a non-alcoholic beer, and they're everywhere, which I thought was really actually great. They're really common to have NA beers everywhere. But and the woman had served a couple of other people the 0 beers, and then she handed me one, and I drank about half of it before I looked at it. And of course it's all in Spanish, which I speak like this much Spanish. Um And I was like, I don't know that this is actually non-alcoholic. So I asked her, I went up and, in my very poor Spanish asked, and she was like, oh my gosh, it's not. She felt horrible. I'd had like half of the beer at that point and I couldn't feel it or anything. There was no actual anything. But it was like later that night in my brain, it was like, well, obviously you're not still addicted because you didn't even want more. Like it wasn't even a problem. And like as soon as the thought came up, I'm like, what on earth is this even? Like I have no desire to drink, but it's so automatic still. And I swear, like I look at that as like almost this monster in your head, right? And it's like, oh, here's an opportunity. Like it hasn't had an opportunity for years at this point to even try to convince me. And here's this new situation. And it's like, oh, maybe this is the chance that I get to get her to drink again.
It didn't hurt you at all, right? So that
Yeah,
didn't hurt you at
exactly.
all.
I didn't leave with a desire to drink again, and so, it was, like, later that night or the next day, and I was like that thought comes up, like, "Oh, well, maybe you're fine now. Look at all the work you've done. You're so much happier and healthier, and emotionally you're better," and then I was like, "Really? But, like, what benefit would there even be at this point to have a drink? Of all of the things that I could do, why would drinking alcohol even be on the list?" And I think that's to speak to what Lucy was talking about. It's not even appealing, and it has nothing that I want anymore. Like the
Mm,
automatic thought was, "Ooh, you can drink again," but almost instantly I was able to be like, "No, there's like no part of me that wants that." I do think that that's a pretty dangerous situation for someone who's 3 months or 6 months or 12 months sober to end up accidentally drinking something and having those same thoughts because I've obviously put a lot more space between me and the last time I drank, but it was really interesting the way it was so automatic, that
mm.
that's the first thing my brain thought of.
If you think of it as a treat, then you will think, if you're moderating, you are still in that world where that voice is telling you you can. You still want it. It's just how much do you want it?
Mhm.
Whereas getting to the point where you don't want it is where you kind of want to be, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. So
Mm,
for those of you who
yeah.
haven't actually tried moderating, which it sounds like almost everybody has except Steve, because Steve's weird. Steve like quit once and that was it. But anyway, for the rest
That's
of
that was I'm with
the
Steve though. Well, yeah, and I was gonna say because I same thing, like very quickly realizing and recognizing like what I had become and where I would go back to if I even started. Yeah, I wouldn't. There's no way I would be able to do that.
Mhm.
So I'm actually on Steve's side there. Yeah, but I mean, I still get those like nostalgic, memory connected kind of desires, but it's very quickly shut down by look how close I came to losing everything,
Right.
and I'm not gonna risk that again ever. So yeah.
Right.
I think too there's a swing side, like, yes, we have to be careful not to view it as a treat, but I think there's a swing on that we also have to work on your self-medication voice, because just because you quit drinking doesn't mean that life gets roses and rainbows. And anxiety is a very common issue for alcoholics. So I think that the other voice you have to fight is that you're self-medicating a situation and it's just this once. It's so bad. My anxiety is so bad. Life is so bad that I can moderate and just self-medicate myself just tonight.
Okay.
That you're at a point where you need your medicine, to get through whatever it is that you're dealing with, it whether it's random anxiety or, a life, life gets lifey or whatever. That's the other voice that I think that a lot of people have to fight, and learning different coping mechanisms, because we have to carve a different path in our brain that is not our medicine, that is not the cure all, and carving new paths of like, I'm going to go meditate. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to talk to my higher power. I'm going to paint or whatever. So like carving that new pathway of not using it as medicine or as self-medication for anxiety, or when life gets lifey or any of those things. That's a whole nother thing. Like, we're we're working on moderation, but like as alcoholics, we can convince ourselves that there are multiple situations we could moderate in. So I think there's a swing to that. There's the treat side and there's the self-medicating side, you know?
Definitely. Well, it's so often you'll hear someone say, like, I've had it. I've done everything I can. I just need a break tonight. That's it. And then I'll be back on tomorrow, right? Like, and it sounds so believable because at some point you reach this, like, I've never coped with this much stress before. I don't know how. I have to take a break. I've never coped with this much grief before. That's the only way I'm going to get a break. And so, yeah, I think you're spot on. That's another really common way that we'll tell ourselves we can moderate.
For me, what I think set the stage up really well was doing the internal work of figuring out the why, like behind the drinking. Like if you do the hard work of figuring out like why is it that you're turning to alcohol? Why is it that you're turning to these things? When in any circumstance, like when life is great, you're celebrating with it. When life is hard, you're using it to help you get through. Like why is that? And what is it about what's going on internally, like in yourself, that you feel like you have to use an outside substance to get through or to celebrate, like on either end? And so, like, until I did that work, and like for me, that looked like, EMDR therapy and a lot of spiritual work and like all that kind of stuff. And you get to a point where, like, for me, so much of it was connected to my identity. And so as that piece started to heal, then I started to realize that celebrating or walking through really hard, really tough times looked a lot different, but that I was able to use, the tools that I had. I was able to use different coping skills to process through all of those different things and not needing something outside of myself. And there is something so absolutely empowering about getting to that space where when you walk through something hard or something amazing happens and you're celebrating and like drinking isn't even a thought
Mhm.
to go there. There is something like insanely empowering about that. And if you're self-conscious enough, you recognize that in yourself and you ought to give yourself a pat on the back because you've been doing the work, and now you're able to walk through life without needing something outside of yourself to live life. And that's huge. And like, that's incredible. Right. And like, we talk all the time about creating a life that you don't need to escape or a life that you love. Like, that's what that looks like. And so, whether it's celebrating something or walking through something really, really hard, you've got the tools and you've done the internal work to figure out, why you did it in the first place. And that's healed up and you can kind of move forward from there. But I think for me, that was a huge piece of it. And I think that's a big part of why the moderation dilemma wasn't so big in my mind, as far as a struggle, because I was able, I was lucky enough to be able to do the internal work and figure out who I am without it, and then begin to actually, like myself and love myself outside of that. So
Mhm.
Yeah, I think my moderating came without me realizing that I was going to ever stop drinking alcohol. I didn't know I was going to stop. I was very much a binge drinker. So I'd have lots of times where I wasn't drinking at all, then lots of times where I'd drink and then I'd drink too much and wish I hadn't, and then think, oh, and like, so I had a lot of that for like years and years. And my body was really telling me that this is really, I've got a lot of health conditions and stuff as well, so that I was kind of battling with my body. And so I always feel like it was the culture, particularly over here in the UK, particularly when I was at university, feminism was really tied up with like what we call the ladette culture, which was like, if you are going to be a strong woman, you need to be able to drink with the men. I can drink a guy under
mm,
the table. I can hold my own. I can hold my own politically. I can hold my own in arguments. I can hold my own with my alcohol. Like, that was such a big identity and a status thing for particularly for women my age. And I hadn't really realized how much, like, I went to cricket and drank 8 pints of beer with all the men because I was like, I'm keeping up, like, I'm not going to be the one. I weigh like they, 2/3 of what most of them weigh. It was insane to try and do it, but like, it's a matter of honor. And it was really only once I started to like really listen to my body more and try and like take better care of myself, that's when I was trying to moderate, because I was trying to balance these two things, like, okay, I've got to, and I think that for me has been like the biggest part of it, is just the how much less work it is to just let it go, to just be free of it. And, so although we talk a lot, I think, in the sober community about the work, and I don't want to undermine that, like, it is a lot of work. You do have to find ways to regulate your emotions and to deal with things. But there's also, we don't talk enough, I don't think, about the lack of work when you give up moderation and you're just like, hell, it's just a no forever. Whoo, now there's no voices in my head that I have to go back and forth. And when am I going to do this? And how am I going to drive there? Or am I going to what if I have to leave all of the conversations that you have to have is just like so much. How much can I let myself have and how much not, how much rope is going to hang me. So I think that like is a massive part of it as well, is like Brenton was saying, like when you can sort of work out, why am I doing this? Is that still who I am? Do I need it? And that one of the things I say this to people a lot, like I've ended up feeling like I think of it like playing with dolls. That's how I try and view it. So when I have that nostalgia kind of moment, like I don't want to play with dolls anymore. Like, but I loved playing with dolls. And if ever people are playing with dolls, that's fine. That's up to them. But to me, I'm now at a point where I'm like, it doesn't interest me. I don't want to do it. So it's just a no. And I feel like that also stops people from, maybe it sounds a bit patronizing sometimes, but it does stop people from pitying me, because it stops them from feeling like I'm there all night wishing I could be like them. And I'm not any more than when I'm watching my little cousins play with their dolls. Like, I don't need to do that. And I'm not judging them for doing it, but it's not for me kind of anymore. So I think that's a great stage. That's been really liberating for me. And I don't think I can't imagine ever wanting to have a drink again. Which I feel like is quite a big relief, to not feel like I'm ever going to have that battle with myself. So that's been a
Yeah.
joy.
That
Yeah, the
feeling.
freedom that you find when you finally are just like, nope, not ever again. Like that's unreal. And I think I mean, we haven't said this yet, but like the concept of, if you're wrestling with moderation, that might be a good clue. Like that, like it blows my mind. Like my wife will, have a drink or have half a beer and just leave it on the table. And I remember back in the day, she would do that, and I would like look at the glass and like look at her and look at the glass and look at her and be like, you just like, we just paid our tab and we're leaving and you're leaving that. Like it blew my mind.
Such
And
a
so like,
waste.
I know, I was like, well, let me finish that for you. And like, and
Right.
then, so like, if you're wrestling with moderation, like if that's even a concept in your head of like, oh, I need to moderate today, or oh, tomorrow I don't have to moderate because there's a driver, or whatever the question is, that may be an indication that something more is going on, and you've got to do the work, or you've got to talk to somebody, or at the very least talk to somebody, or figure out what's going on. But yeah, to your point, Lucy, like the freedom that is found when you get to a point where like you accept that that's just not a part of your life, it's not a part of who you are, is so freeing. Like it's such an incredible feeling to get to that space.
Yeah, and Lucy had a really good point that made me think of something you were talking about, like drinking buddies and going out drinking. I don't know if anybody else had this experience, but I had a lot of people in my last 10 years of drinking that when I would kind of recognize a little bit I had a problem, and they maybe kind of recognized it. So the people I was associating with were trying to help me moderate. Or it'd be
Mm,
like, "It's okay, you can drink with me because I'll make sure you only have so many,"
They'll
and
protect you.
yes, exactly, like, I will dose you, whatever.
yeah.
And so, it's really interesting when you do finally make that choice of really accepting you cannot have it with your friends. Like, one of 2 things will happen. Either you will say no, and they will totally accept it and respect that boundary, or they will continue to push that boundary. And for me, the friends that would continue to push that boundary were no longer my friends, and, like when they say you got to change your people, places, and things, there were a lot of friends that I had to, we're still friends, but I don't go hang out with them because I know that they're going to try to help me moderate, and so it's really interesting that shift in your friends that will happen, because I can't tell you how many times I was like, I'm not drinking anymore. And then someone would be like, yeah, but I'm going to give you one and you'll be fine. And I won't let you drink anymore. But I'm an alcoholic. I will go find that and I will keep going. you may give me one and hide the rest in the cabinet, but trust me, I will break into that cabinet and get the rest.
Right.
So,
Mm.
it was
Yeah.
interesting to me.
Everybody just it's so like, and I think Lucy has said this too. It's just considered so normal and necessary. Like it's this part of our life that everybody assumes we're missing out on, and that in order to be happy, you must be able to drink normally. And so that seems to be what everyone strives for, is that normal drinking. I
Mhm.
remember setting rules for myself. Like at one point, I even charted out like in my calendar when I would drink and how much I would drink, so I could have like one beer on Wednesday night because it was halfway through the week. But otherwise, I was only going to drink on Friday and Saturday, and it was only going to be 3 drinks, and and then I would hit that Wednesday night and I'd have like four, or I'd drink like a whole bottle of wine, and then I'd be like, okay, well, I'm fine. So I can have one on Thursday now because I think I'm okay. And like I would constantly be writing and rewriting these rules. And if I couldn't quite keep it, I'd adjust it a little bit. And like just the amount of mental and emotional energy that goes into trying to control something that was for me completely out of control. It was
Mhm.
exhausting. I poured so much wasted time and energy into trying to be quote unquote normal because I thought it was necessary for so long. And I think at some point, most of us have probably run into some version of that. When you actually did try, and Bri, I'm gonna ask you this specifically because you said you did go a long stretch of time without drinking, and I
Mhm.
did the same thing. I have a similar story. And then you decided, "Okay, I can go and I can just, have this one martini." What did
Mhm.
that look like? What did that process of quote unquote moderating, how did that actually turn out for you? Because I think that's an important story for listeners to hear that are kind of tossing around the idea of whether or not they can go back to it.
Yeah, so for me, like I said, I did end up having just one drink that night. And it's so interesting because I very specifically remember when the buzz hit my body and I was kind of like, oh, I don't know if I like this. I want to say kind of what happened was it was like 2 nights later, I was like, I can have one. 2 nights later, I can have two. 3 or 4 nights, it was like for me, what would happen is it would be this slow decline until I was in bed for 5 days straight on a bender. And
Mhm.
that was I had this cycle. I would go on a really big bender and then I'd pull myself out of it because I had to go to work. I had to be a mom. I had to do all the things. And I'd be like, okay, I'm not drinking anymore. And I would go, 3 days, a week, 2 weeks. And then it would start slow. I'd have one, then it'd be two, then it'd be four, then it'd be five, then it'd be a whole case. So it was just kind of like, I remember that I remember coming home that night and just being like, "I did it. I had one. Like, I'm good. We're good." And then within 6 months, I was back on my bender wheel. So it starts slow, and, like, they say that this disease is cunning and baffling, and that's because it'll sneak. It sneaks. It
Mhm.
sneaks and crawls until all of a sudden you're like, "I'm right back where I started. Damn it.
Well,
Here we go again."
you have the one, and I mean, I didn't get to experience this, but I'm listening to you talk, and I'm like, you have the one, and then you control yourself, so you confirm the belief that after having one that night,
Bingo.
that that you can have, you're fine. I did it, right? The
Bingo.
challenge. I have accepted the challenge of I had a drink. I only said I was going to have one. One's down. I had a great night after that. I got this.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. I had almost the exact same experience, Bri. I was sober for around a year and a half, and I knew there were some beers in the fridge downstairs, and I had had like a rough day, and I'd already been thinking about it. I think that is one thing that and this goes back to the whole like the relapse starts way before you actually take the drink. And I know I
Yeah.
had been kind of like thinking about it and kind of wondering if moderation was an option. And at that moment, something snapped, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to have the one. And I did. It was one, and it was great. And I was like, okay, this is nice. I can have one drink. And I remember the same thing. I felt that buzz, and I was like, oh, it only takes one now. I don't have to drink six to feel a buzz anymore.
Mhm.
This is great. So I'm obviously better. And again, 6 months is about what it took to go from I can drink one to I was drinking whiskey at 10 o'clock in the morning out of the bottle, which was way beyond anywhere I had ever been before. Like I was 10 times worse within 6 months than I ever had been prior. And then for me, and this is what kind of, I guess, the one thing that makes the idea that moderation's never going to be an option for me, I would kind of, like Bri said, I would drink and I would, it would get out of control and then I'd moderate again and then it would get out of control and, that cycle that we've all been in at some point. And then I was about 6 months into my attempt at moderating and my dog was killed. And that was the thing. And Lucy, you said this before, you don't know what's gonna set you off. What is gonna happen in your life where all bets are off and you're gonna fully lose control. And that's what happened for me. I was trying to moderate and kind of doing it, sort of. And then one horrible experience that I didn't have the coping skills to deal with, and I was completely off the rails. And we don't know when that's going to happen. For me, I know that if alcohol is on the table as an option to cope when life gets hard, that's probably the first place I'm going to turn to. So it just can't be an option because I will burn my life to the ground. And I've proven that to myself.
Take the decision away.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Just even for that day, that event, then you no longer had to make the decision over and over and over again. Get rid of the maybe.
Mm-hmm. That's the decision fatigue, right? If you have to keep making the same decision over and over again, eventually you're going to get sick of making the decision and you're going to be like, fine, I'm just going to give in. And if you, for me, and I think for a lot of the people that I work with, I know that, AA is really big on the one day at a time. And I know that that's like exactly what a lot of people need. For me, starting out, it was really helpful to say 30 days. I'm doing 30 days, no matter what happens, no matter how bad things get, no matter how hard this is. I am not even going to consider drinking for 30 days because I need to know what it feels like at the end of 30 days to not have had a drink. And that was the magical thing for me, was taking the decision off the table. For 30 days, I didn't have to decide one way or another. I didn't have to wake up in the morning and decide if there was going to be any drinking happening that day or not. And whether that is for one day at a time or a week at a time or 30 days at a time, getting rid of the decision is huge.
It's the Sober October. I did that like 3 years. I did Sober October and I just felt amazing. And then the year before I gave up, as October was coming towards me, I was like, oh, can't wait for Sober October. I'm really looking forward to it. And then I was like, this is like messed up. And the week before I stopped drinking, I was like going through in my head, right, I'm going to be at this party, so I've got to drink there. Then I'm going to a charity function and there'll be free alcohol, so I'll have to drink there. But then I've got 3 days where I'm doing nothing, so I won't have to drink. And that was when, for me, it changed because I was listening to my body so much more and I was making that decision with my body. Like, you are going to have to suffer culturally through these things and then you'll get to have what has become your favorite happy place. And so I was really lucky that I'm similar, like sounds like to some extent, I didn't go back to more. Once I decided to stop, I never went back to it again. And that was really, I feel forever grateful for not having that. All my moderation was prior to me, but at the time I thought I was going to stop. I didn't think there was any way. I couldn't imagine a life where you don't drink alcohol like ever again. And it's culturally so ingrained. Like, I went to Cannes Film Festival this year. I was in a tent full of people and I said, what have you got that has no alcohol? And they said, no alcohol. And I went, yeah, without alcohol in it. And they looked at me like I had 3 heads. And then I said, okay, can I just have some water, please? And they didn't have water. They didn't have water.
Wow.
They had nothing without alcohol at a big industry event. I mean, that is unusual. And I've got to say a little French as well.
Right.
Most places I go now, you have something, but it is still I think society can help people with that as well. Like you were saying, Julie, when you went to the place and they had the alcohol-free beer, unfortunately she didn't give it to you, so it's not like full gold star for her, but they had those things available. And I think like giving people, because again, like you're saying, that takes the decision off the table. And that's my most hated thing is when I'm there and there's nothing for me to drink, because then you get the sympathy. Then people are like, oh, well, you could just have one. Like, oh, you're fine. You've been so good and you never had that big of a problem anyway. And you blah, 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 blah. All of this stuff.
Right.
I don't want that conversation in my life. I want to go
Yeah.
up and order something that I can stand and not look like I'm, not have anything to drink when I'm talking and networking with people and stuff like that. I want to have something, available. So I feel like we've got to keep pushing to help normalize it. And then when people really are struggling, they do have that ability to just say it's off the table. Because I know if I'd have been
Right.
moderating, I would have been like, oh, for God's sake, Lucy, just have a wine. You're going to have a wine Saturday anyway. So what difference does it make? It's a Tuesday, like you were talking about, Julie, with your calendar. I was
Yeah.
always that, like, not until this time, not until this, like on a weekend, only if I'm out, not if I'm in my house, like all of these different aspects to it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and you
It
would be,
is.
if it's not available, then that helps. If well, I've got no option, like, and this is how normal it is. I'm the one that's weird, that I'm trying to do something that goes against the whole culture of the world, like.
Right. It feels super alone. I get that. It feels really lonely when you feel like you're the only one out there. We are at a point where I'm going to go ahead and kind of bring us around and wrap it up a little bit, but I'm going to ask you each just a question if you want to give me a sentence or two to kind of bring this together for our listeners that are probably, thinking about whether or not moderating is a good option for them. So if I were to ask you, what's one gift that finally came from letting go of the idea of moderation? Bri, what would you say to that? What's one gift that letting go of moderation gave you?
Freedom. It just took the whole weight of worrying about how to moderate. A lot of freedom came with that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Yeah. What about you, Brenton?
I would probably say peace,
Mm,
like just peace everywhere, all over the life internally. Like, yeah, once that's off the table, yeah, it's so much more peaceful. Yeah.
definitely. Lucy?
Well, this is funny because I was thinking freedom, 100% freedom. And then I'm like, oh, okay, that one's gone. What am I going to say next? I think I'll go with
Sorry.
peace. Definitely go with peace. That's definitely the next thing. Now that one's gone. So I feel like I'm going to
Oh,
tie the two of them together, and I'm going to say myself, because I
Yes.
feel like that ability to reconnect to who I was before I got hijacked by the alcohol culture and the marketing and the world of alcohol, that person that finds joy in life and in my friends and in music and movement and all of those things that are the dopamine that I need, that are the joy in my the buzz that I have, that's my, I know is me. When I can't sleep at 3 a.m. after a party, I'm buzzing. I'm buzzing, not
Mm-hmm.
buzz, no, not the alcohol buzzing in me until I pass out. Like, that's a natural me buzz. So
Yeah.
I'm going to go with that. Me is the best gift it's given me
I'm
back.
gonna that me buzz. I'm totally stealing that me buzz. I like.
Absolutely. No, these are all such good answers. I think I was kind of going to say freedom too. I think that's something we've all agreed on here that we've gotten back. I'll say like opportunity. Every time I drank, every time I sat there giving up all of my energy, mental energy, physical energy to drinking or not drinking or back and forth, I was missing out on all of the other opportunities in my life. I was missing out on the fun and the connection and the joy and the creativity and everything else because all of my mental energy was going to drinking or not drinking. And so now I have the opportunity to do so many things that before I just gave away.
It's too funny.
Mhm.
Everybody just landed on freedom. I'm not even going to bother reinventing the wheel. Right? The wheel doesn't need to be in. It's clearly the wheel is in all of what you all said. So I want to say thank you, Bri.
Bri.
It's Bri.
Bri like the right.
Thank you, Bri. Thank you,
You're welcome.
Brenton.
Thank you, Lucy. It's nice to have you guys here. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and experiences. We really appreciate you.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks for having
Yeah,
us on.
thanks for having us. It's been great. Really
Thanks
great.
so much, you guys.